Well, on Friday, Dean Liddell and Neil Harkins were each sentenced to 9 months for breaching the injunction banning any revelation of the adult identities of Thompson and Venables, the killers of James Bulger. They posted photos on Twitter and Facebook purporting to be of Thompson and Venables last February, which the judge said could have been seen by thousands of social media users. Is social media out of control? Vicky Beeching, I mean, you study this. I mean, you're a research fellow in internet ethics, the very person. It's wonderful, though, isn't it, as an exchange of ideas, making contacts, getting news. But you have experienced the downside, haven't you?
I have, yeah. I've been subject to quite a lot of trolling and stalking. Back when I lived in America, I actually had to take it to the authorities. There were threats that were, threatening my personal safety, and I really did feel like a victim. But at the same time, my answer to your question would be twofold. Firstly, I think we need to remember that social media is in its infancy. It's so young, Twitter's turned 7, YouTube's turned 8. We're literally taking baby steps, so we can't panic and say it's out of control. And secondly, the danger is when we look at the technology and we say the technology is to blame. We need to remember that all technologies, whether it's the invention of the wheel, the printing press, or the internet, they're neutral tools. They're in our hands, and if they're out of control, it's simply a sign that we're out of control.
So it's a reflection of us.
It is.
And overarchingly, most people are decent, most people are fair, most people have a sense of fair play.
I think technology is a magnifying glass that brings out our true colours.
Is there something about, Kate, what's your experience? Is there something about social media that allows people to be particularly vile, do you think?
Absolutely. I think it's funny enough, several decades ago, Germaine Greer said women have little idea how much men hate them. Well, thank you, the internet. We know. We've heard that, and I am... I am less than a week from my most recent death threat, and that's my life. That is normal for me. The first time it happened about 5 or 6 years ago, it was terrifying. Now it's very standard. I don't think the solution is to have some massive crackdown on social media. And I think there are existing laws that are there. It is illegal to make death threats. It is illegal to make malicious communications. It is illegal to threaten and intimidate people, whether you do it in person or online or through whatever medium. What we actually need is for the police to get up to speed on these issues and to have a really nice, efficient system where you copy the message, you send it over to the police, and they can investigate it. Because the truth is, I don't send these messages to the police. I contact a 19-year-old I know who will immediately know much more about how to research it, how to find out who it is, and establish if it's a real threat or if it's nothing to worry about.
Nicky, can I just agree with both what Vicky and Kate have said? Look, if you're on the social media, I get them as well. We all get obsessives. We all get trolls. That's the nature of it. Most of the time, you get people wanting to engage in conversation and get to know you. But yeah, we just tend to ignore the obsessives and the trolls and let them get on with it. But social media does reflect society. And I was really impressed what Vicky said a moment ago about it being in a very early stage. We need to remind ourselves.
Can I just stop you there? I know you're going to make a very important point, but you say it reflects society. In society, getting people, what some women have to put up with, threatening to rape you, threatening to murder you, is that a reflection of society?
No, there are steps, as far as the law is concerned, that can deal with that. The point is, we don't need to regulate the social media. We all have this knee-jerk response to regulate. There's over-regulation anyway. There are, again, going back to what Kate said, a lot of laws. We've had 6 acts of Parliament. Harassment Acts, Malicious Communications Act, Communications Act that my client Paul Chambers was prosecuted under.
The Twitter joke trial.
The Twitter joke trial. Public order legislation. All these acts of Parliament are there and can powerfully be used. One point about the police, though. Let's be careful about reporting things to the police. Quite right to report the examples that you both gave, serious examples, but sometimes there's an over-reporting.
There's a Tom Daley example. Somebody tweeted something really awful about Tom Daley, and it went through the police channels, didn't it?
It's a matter of common sense and balance. I mean, common sense is the word as far as social media is concerned. The one thing I would like to get out there, if I can, I think it's important. Let's not knee-jerk and always inform the police. If it's bad, it's bad. The police have to be involved. But the police are being overstretched as it is in the moment. And I think the plea from the police, I don't know whether any police officers here today, but the plea from the police is, yes, report it, but don't knee-jerk report everything.
Yeah, if everybody's crying wolf, I mean, we end up filling up the airwaves.
Precisely.
But my problem was really to do with jurisdiction. Back in 4 or 5 years ago when I made my complaints, the police were just saying, well, we can't really deal with it because it's not in our city, and then it wasn't in their state, and it was in a different state, and it got very complicated.
Well, that's unacceptable.
But, over here, I think we've definitely made progress. And
I think we have to make a distinction between social media comments that are merely offensive, which are not nice, and I wouldn't encourage them, and those that actually encourage violence and death.
Have you had a lot of that?
I've been on the receiving end. When I ambushed Nick Griffin, the leader of the BNP some years ago, to challenge him over his bigoted views towards gay people, Jews, Muslims, and black and ethnic minority people. Some of his supporters reacted by spreading lies on the internet that I'm a paedophile, and they even photoshopped pictures to make it look as though I was carrying a placard from the paedophile information exchange. That's completely faked, but lots of people, sadly, do believe it, and I have been absolutely deluged with death threats. And it's quite scary. You don't know. I think most of these people are just having it on, just being nasty. But sometimes you wonder, maybe one of these nutters will actually try.
Is it the anonymity then? Were they anonymous in their threats?
Most of them, yes.
Is anonymity the problem here?
But partly, it gives them the carte blanche or the security that they can say things that they
But if you're a blogger in China, anonymity is an absolute blessing.
They think they have anonymity, but let me say now, the law's changed. There's something called the Norwich Farmer Colour Order, which lawyers use nowadays, that can contact third parties like Twitter, like Facebook, and compel them to reveal who these trolls are, who these obsessives are, and who these, if they're doing the sort of things that we've just heard about, criminals are. So let it be very, very clear indeed. Those people tweeting anonymously will be found out. But just one other thing as well, linking on to what Peter said. It's also important that law enforcement agencies get a grip as well. Going back to the Paul Chambers case, I know the Twitter joke trial is one of the seminal cases that I did along with David Allen Green of Press Skills. And that was a man who simply tweeted to his girlfriend, if this airport closes down, I'm going to blow the place up. Now, the fact of the matter is the police didn't take it seriously, the security didn't take it seriously at the airport, but the CPS, for some reason, best known to themselves, decided to prosecute this through 7 different court hearings, wasting thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money.
It was a cause célèbre, wasn't it?
Well, it was indeed, and a lot of Kate's colleagues from the performing arts got involved as well. The fact is, it linked into freedom of speech as well.
OK, yes, the gentleman up there with your hand up. Good morning.
Good morning. It worries me that we're expecting the police to take a big role in this. It seems to me that companies like Twitter and YouTube are doing this all on the cheap. Back in the 90s, I was a moderator on AOL, and they had a very good system of throwing people off forums who were abusing other people. And these new companies, new media, they don't seem to be taking the responsibility.
And there seems to be as well James, I'll bring you in here. There seems to be sometimes people perceive an inconsistency. There was a very good report on Channel 4 News the other night from Alec Thompson about this video of a baby, horrific footage of a baby being beaten. The person has been arraigned who was responsible for it, but it's up there. It was taken down temporarily. It's back up there. It's had lots of likes, meaning people approve of the fact that this footage is there. And yet they there have been cases of people breastfeeding taken down from Facebook. So there seems to be an inconsistency.
I mean, to start off with, social media and content that's uploaded can be uploaded by publishers and it can be uploaded by individuals.
But we are all publishers, aren't we?
We are now, we are indeed. And it's a place where discussion can occur. Now, when content's uploaded, it can be censored, it can be taken down by different platforms, but it's really up to us to decide as individuals what we want to watch, what we want to engage with, and what we do not want to engage with.
Well, Facebook decided it wasn't gratuitous violence. They thought it was in an appropriate context. You wouldn't see that, though, on BBC News or anything like that, unless it was in a very specific context. So there's a different standard applied here, isn't there? Chris?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I'm interested in this anonymity question, because obviously anonymity can be used terribly to troll and abuse other people. But actually thinking about the Iraq War, for example, Salam Pax was the Baghdad blogger who was able to express opinions that would have put him in prison or had him killed, or, as you mentioned, in China. So how do we get this balance right between protecting people in states where oppression is taking place, or whistleblowers that need to be able to tell what's going on?
And as a Christian, you believe that you know Christians in places where they are under the cosh.
Sure, not just
you think
Christians,
they should be able to get their
there's a delicate balance here on the freedom of speech issue as well. Freedom of speech isn't always freedom to say things that are nice. Freedom of speech is to say things that can be objectionable.
But shouldn't we give leeway? Shouldn't we give leeway to people on social networking sites, because it's very much an instantaneous thing.
It's instant, and it's a conversation as well. Yeah. You're having a conversation. You're debating certain areas.
People should just have common sense is the key.
Well, I mean, I think that what we need to do is for there to be much more training for people in the police and in these, so to say, hold on a minute, what does malicious communication look like? How can we investigate it? And you know, because as I say, the average teenager I know knows loads more about what's going on the internet than when I report these things to the police. And the reality is, if we had our police forces given the resources and given the training to do this, the internet is full of information, and so much of it could lead to arresting real criminals committing real crimes. And it would be so much better to not waste time.
Did you report the people?
Initially, the first few times I had death threats,
it must have been awful. It must have been.
The first few times it was absolutely terrifying, but these days I'm so used to it, and I think it's quite. People get very worried when I discuss it, and I'm quite casual about it. But unless they seem to know where I live, I generally just file it under abuse and leave it to one side on the basis of nothing's going to happen. There's no point in anything else.
The Boston bombings.
The Boston bombings is a great example of how the police force, to begin with, engaged with the community. They asked for marathon runners to participate. They asked for content to be uploaded to them, and the individuals really felt engaged. They felt as if they were doing something positive, which they were, and eventually the two suspects were apprehended.
Lots of people were also wrongly named as well.
Yes.
And it's quite interesting.
That was really an example of social media, I think, at its worst, when, you know, the
best and worst, you know.
Absolutely, and I think we all learnt a lot, because, like I said, we're in the infancy of these technologies. We're taking baby steps, and we're learning how to take things seriously, how not to. And lots of us retweeted things that were incorrect and won't do it again.
I want to speak to Leon.
It's the self-policing as well. The self-policing.
Well, self-regulation.
But it sorts itself out, doesn't it? We're learning as we
go. I wanted to speak to Leon.
I
want to speak to Leon. I'll come back to you. But self-regulation, some will argue, well, it didn't work with the press. Is it going to work with social networking? Leon, you work with, you know, kids that have got, you know, challenged kids that got problems. And how have you found that has the use of social networking been good or bad?
A bit of both. Some people use it for violence, for meeting up and saying, well, let's make music about other people. And that's where it's a problem. I think that if people had to identify themselves properly, then you wouldn't have half of the problems. The problem is that people know that they can make music or they can make videos and they will be anonymous, and that's the problem. Whereas these sites are worth billions of pounds, I'm sure they can police it themselves if they wanted to, really.
So that is the Cole Morton.
Well, one aspect of this that we haven't touched on so far is the global aspect of it.
Yeah.
And Vicky or Kate can get messages from somebody anywhere in the world. And as I've written stuff that's appeared online, I've had responses from all over the world.
It's amazing.
Lord Leveson, looking at press regulation, scratched his head when it came to social media and said, well, it's a terrible thing. I don't quite know what to do about it. And actually what's going on is a dislocation. We talk about, John talks about publishing, and we must all be aware that we're publishing every time we tweet. But we're thinking as if we're acting within a British media context. But actually, we're operating in a great human soup that stretches all across the
Should there not
planet.
be an element of responsibility? For example, you know, the whole Lord McAlpine business. There's a comedian mentioned on one of the front pages today who may well or may well not be interviewed by police in connection to the Savile business. You can find his name quite easily on Twitter. Twitter and Facebook was at the very forefront of people trying to get regulation of the press, and yet the standards adhered to very often on Twitter and Facebook are way below standards ever adhered to by the press.
We've talked about educating the police. What actually happens here, needs to happen here too, is that we need to educate the people who are using Facebook and Twitter to understand that when you slag somebody off, you are actually making a published comment that is published around the world.
John, if I may, some hands have shot up. Let's see if go on. Morning.
In relation to the Boston bombings, I think people need to be responsible for what they say, even though they may have free speech. And they did identify the wrong person, and now that person is no longer with us. So there is a consequence.
Free speech is incredibly important.
It is.
And must be defended. But it does not include the right to libel people, to make false allegations that someone is a child sex abuser or that they're a tax fraudster when they're not. It also does not mean the right to incite violence against other people, to menace and threaten them. That is an abuse of free speech, and it closes down debate, because the consequence is, if you're under threat to be killed or have violent acts against you, you're afraid to speak out. So that's no real free speech when people can't participate.
You've been confronting people for a long time, bravely, and we applaud that. But surely you've had death threats, you've had people accuse you of false things, going back 20 or 30 years. All that's happened here is the amplification of what was already happening.
And new means as well. Leon, what about the racism aspect? These people would have been racist anyway, wouldn't they, without this new tool of communication?
Yeah, they would have, but it just makes it a lot easier for people to be racist. Now, you're not taking down videos. There are millions of videos on YouTube that should be taken down, but they're not. So people are going to keep putting them up and watching them.
What sort of stuff, what sort of content are you talking about?
There's a lot in South Africa where the police were attacking black people with AK-47s and making them stand there. And that was up there for months. In fact, it's still up there now. That should be taken down, but it's not.
I would argue the other way. When such content is published online, it evokes conversation. If people create content...
So we should leave it up there?
It should be there. Well, it shouldn't be censored. It shouldn't be taken down. There should be a conversation around it, which there is, such as today. If people have got racist thoughts and racist publications occur online, if they're taken down and it's put into a corner, it's forgotten about. If we open it up to public debate, then the people who have uploaded them, the people engaged in such kind of...
That's when the kind of self-regulation...
That's the point.
It's self-regulation and...
So that's exactly right. The self-policing of the social media is important. And let's get the positives here. This is a medium which educates, which brings people together, which communicates. And let's have some positives here about it.
Leon, do you want to come back in?
Self-policing isn't possible.
Sorry, the next question. So, what about pornography? Should that be taken down?
Pornography, when it's legal, it shouldn't be taken down.
But I mean, on like YouTube.
But I think that's exactly what I'm saying, is if the police were more educated on this, when pornography videos were uploaded that appeared to show violence and illegal acts taking place or underage participants, we could immediately, the police could jump in and go, great, there's evidence, there's video evidence. And when stuff is taking place that's been, you know, consenting adults and it's all been done carefully and legitimately and above board, that can be left and people can access that if they want to or not.
The same with the Boston bombings as well. As soon as there was somebody who was put into the public realm as being a possible bomber, the police should have reacted quicker. They should have noticed that there was this discussion going on Reddit and on other platforms and taken a reactive response and publicly said this person isn't involved in order to kind of nip that in the bud at the beginning.
Right, some hands went up, if I may, so at the back. Good morning, hello.
Good morning. Certainly individuals use social media for instant updates. However, this growing trend needs to be understood by people and just to be like sort of, it should only be used for a catalyst to find other information, and it shouldn't be, people shouldn't be jumping to conclusions because, like, for example, with Sunil Tripathi, his name was trending worldwide on Twitter, and it was quite sad.
Yeah, terrible. Yeah, Yusuf, hi. You did have your hand up a couple of minutes ago.
I just want to say on the point of like social media websites regulating themselves, I think it's very unrealistic to think that they would ever be able to effectively do so.
But like, most people are decent. Most people are fair-minded.
Like, it's like saying, because it's a form of communication, it's like saying that we should expect like the phone company to regulate our conversations or the Royal Mail to regulate our posts. It's up to the individual to know what to do in that situation. And there needs to be a proper complaints procedure put in place.
And besides you, hi.
I think at the beginning people were saying that the internet reflects ourselves and it acts as a magnifying glass, but I'm not actually sure that's true, because there are things that people say on the internet that they would never dream of saying in real life. Exactly. And the internet certainly brings out...
But the internet is
brings
real.
out our voyeuristic aspects.
That's it, Leon. Leon just agreed with you. Leon just went exactly.
That's what I'm saying. If people had to identify themselves, they wouldn't say these things, but it's the fact that they don't have to. That's the problem.
Again, they can be identified. Sorry, yeah, they can be identified. I've explained again. There's this myth going around. I understand what you're saying. There's this myth going around. They can't be identified.
But it's quite a process, isn't it?
It is a process.
It's a long process.
But I also think it's important that those people that do this sort of thing know there is a process. I think it's important.
Peter Tatchell, isn't there something rather wonderful about the way that if somebody does post something outrageous or say something outrageous, the vast majority of people who are decent will react to it in a proper way?
Mostly, but sometimes surprising numbers of good,
people
decent people...
you.
Surprisingly, a fair number of good, decent people sometimes believe these lies because some of them are very sophisticated. Like when the BNP supporters photoshopped this image, it looks really genuine. It looks really, though I'm holding a paedophile information exchange, a placard. I've never, ever endorsed adults having sex with children.
Of course you haven't, but
I never would.
Did you attempt
but
to find the source? Did you attempt?
Yes, but it's all... I don't know how to do it. Plus, I'll get your advice.
We'll talk after the show.
Usual fee plus expenses.
Answer my card, yeah.
Yeah, gentleman there, hi.
Also, with the fact of people getting tracked, you'll be very surprised. There's people who have got hacking knowledge. You can't get tracked. Like, I know normal people that can get hacked into big businesses. Like, I don't know if you saw on Twitter the other day, McDonald's Twitter got hacked by somebody who changed their name to Burger King. Yeah. And then they put a Burger King picture and things like that. They never found them. And even with your average person, I could troll somebody. I could go to, say, a public library. I can set up my own email. How are they going to know it's me? They can't know. Or I can set another email to make another email.
Right to the back. Very good point.
I think we underestimate the revolutionary effects almost of Twitter and Facebook. We can see that in the Arab Spring, for example, that would not have happened, most probably, without the effects of Twitter and Facebook. And the liberty that can bring is very difficult to be... You be very careful, at least, when regulating that.
But it also shows you, doesn't it, as well, James, you might comment on this, how easy it is for the big companies to actually cut their cloth. Google in China, for example, and Chris, maybe, I mean, because, you know, China said, look, you know, get out of here, and Google said, OK, then. Yeah, we'll compromise.
That's the problem of asking the internet companies to police themselves, because if it's an internet company versus a government...
If it's profits versus freedom.
Well, they'll never make the right choices. So it's a real tough balance, actually.
But at the same time as that's happening, the mobile phone networks are also at work in China, and messaging through the mobile phone networks is less regulated, and that dissidence is able to flourish there. It used to be said that it took you 6 months from beginning to leaflet to be able to fill Trafalgar Square if you had a protest. Now it can take a week.
The police were the last people that will want to control Twitter, I'll tell you that now, and one can see as an example during the recent Thatcher funeral. They were doing a lot of investigations, watching social media, seeing what people were talking about, seeing what potential protesters were talking about.
Indeed.
So for the police, it's a useful investigative tool.
And also for future employers. And also for journalists, it's an easy Sunday afternoon, isn't it? Going through what people have said.
I was going to make the point that it also opens up the issue of, do we have a right to a private world and a public world? A lot of people use Facebook as though that's their private world. They put private settings there. I myself don't know how private those private settings are. I don't understand how it is. But there have already been cases where people have got into trouble at work for things they've said to their friends on Facebook, where they weren't intending to have conversations that would impact their work, but there have even been, you know, legal issues arising from that. And do people feel that you have a right to have a private world? Should your employer be looking at your private world?
You might as well be putting it on the front page of the Daily Mail.
You have to assume that.
I'll come to that in the Sunday Telegraph.
I think
Thank you very much, at Cole Morton. Is that right?